started on Friday night with 16 picks and then some supplemental picks afterwards. And then on Monday night, we had 24 picks with some supplemental picks after that. Just quickly, the format of the draft, the way that the picks were, the way the rounds were, because obviously they say we're going to have 4 rounds. I don't necessarily know what that means, right, when it comes to this. And then we had the supplemental picks, which, again, don't really know what that means either, other than just more picks. So the format of the draft, what do you make of the format of the draft when it comes to how they pick the wrestlers, essentially? Obviously, we talked about it last week. The champions were off limits except the tag champs for the women. Yeah. But the format, how long the rounds were, the supplemental picks, like, how many rounds per night. What do you make of the format?
I think it's weird. I'm not the biggest fan of it, to be honest with you. I kind of, I think the highlights for me were the NXT picks. I think that was the format itself was meh, but I do like the fact that they did kind of like a draft party format at the NXT arena, the Performance Center. I like that. Like that was cool. I think I wasn't shocked by 3 of the names that were called up. The one that shocked me the most was Blair Davenport. Like, I wasn't really – that was a name that I'm not going to lie to you. Like, I'm not very familiar with her. I haven't watched a lot of her work. So, people that maybe watch NXT every single week that are religious fans of the product, maybe they can – maybe they know more about it than I do. But, I mean, she seems like she has a good look. I think, she from what I've seen, it seems like she's a quality worker. I think she has, obviously she's got some room to grow because she was in NXT, but – obviously, the powers that be thought she was ready to rock and roll, and I'm excited to see what happens with her because there's a lot of unknowns for her. But the other ones, like Lyra Valkyria, I'm not surprised by that. She's a star. She looks great. She's a very good competitor. She's good on the microphone. I think she's got a really good character. And then obviously the Mad Dragon, Ilya Dragunov, like that's cool. Like those 2 in particular. Valkyria and Dragunov are going to be on Raw.
So you knew Kiana James, or you thought at least that Kiana James, that didn't stick out to you at all?
I knew enough of her where I thought she was. The powers that be, like, obviously think highly enough of her. Yeah, she was another name too. I honestly forgot that she was on there because I kind of assumed that she was going to get called up. I mean, she has an interesting background, and she definitely has the personality to be on the main roster. So. Yeah, I'd have to say her and Blair Davenport are definitely interesting characters, I would say. I'm excited to see Dragunov on Raw. Like, that's going to be cool.
I will say, when we talk about the format of the draft, and I understand this, but here's the thing, and again, just every single time we have an episode of this show, I reference that made-up book that is in publication. It's going to come someday. I'm sorry, folks. It's taken forever to print, but we just keep adding amendments to it about 101 reasons plus why wrestling is a scripted product without having to actually watch the matches or without actually worrying about if they're hitting each other. Because believe me, that is the least. If you're looking to find, and I say this every time, there's so many ways we can show you where wrestling is scripted that doesn't have anything to do with that guy didn't really punch that guy or that guy didn't really kick that guy, right? So many reasons. And the reason I'm going to bring up this time around related to the WWE draft is, right, that we were just free for all when it comes to the factions, right? So, like, as Pat McAfee kind of joked in what was round 1 of the draft on Monday Night Raw, we made out winners because Raw drafted 6 people, SmackDown drafted 2 people, right? And essentially, if that was on the table, you think all these factions would just go right off the board because you're getting multiple people, right? And even though the Bloodline got drafted, despite the fact that Roman Reigns, he withheld from the draft, I get it, but I also, it just doesn't make any logical sense, right? It makes wrestling sense. It makes sense from a fan's perspective of the entertainment of the show. But yeah, like, why essentially, like, things like the Bloodline wouldn't go first if you knew you were getting the whole group, or, even Alpha Academy, right?
Drew McIntyre, that was an interesting one. Really quick on Drew McIntyre, he was on Pat McAfee's show this week. By the way, if you hadn't seen it, you got to go back and watch it. Not only you, my friend, but anyone that's checking out our show, got to go check it out. It was on, I believe, Wednesday this week. So May 1st episode of Pat McAfee's show. It's about like between 1 and 2 o'clock. You just got to fast forward through it, or they may have the clip up somewhere. But I was watching the show live yesterday. Drew McIntyre, he went scorched earth on CM Punk and Michael Cole. It was great, and then they talked about the announced deal that he had. So like for me, like Drew McIntyre also went on a rant about like how am I not drafted already kind of a thing, and that's I guess that's the other point of the format that was a little goofy for me because Drew McIntyre in any other situation I feel like would have been a first round pick. I mean, am I wrong on that?
Yeah, everybody. Yeah, you're right. Not a first round. There's 2 first rounds too.
Yeah.
If you follow us on social media, I'm a stickler for being precise. You know what I mean, and trying to be as factual about things as possible. So I did post all the picks as they happened on our social media, on our Twitter platforms, and on Twitter I made sure that I posted it from night 1 through night 2. I didn't just pick up round 1 Raw. No, it was Raw kicked off with round 5, right? And Raw kicked off with picks 17, 18, 19, and 20, right? For the draft. So I didn't just do round 2, pick 1, round 3, pick 1, that kind of nonsense. So yes, there was 2 round 1s, and he was available on Monday Night Raw, and he did not go right during round 1. CM Punk went during round 2. Drew McIntyre went through round 3. I would say that I would have taken him over. I mean, here's the deal. Like, it is difficult to pick Drew McIntyre, I guess, if I'm looking at it right now, because Imperium went 1, and right, you get Gunther, and you get Ludwig, right? They split that up, so Giovanni Vinci, he's now going to SmackDown by himself, so he's not a part of that group. But again, Damage Control, that's a whole group. Difficult not to pick them. Jade Cargill, difficult not to pick her. Kevin Owens, difficult not to pick him. The Pride, Bobby Lashley, and the whole group, difficult not. So, I will say I would have picked
the Pride over Drew McIntyre.
I mean, to be fair, it's difficult because, again, like the draft doesn't make so much sense. So you're like wondering over here, like how many females you want, how many males do you want, depending on what, you got going. You definitely want somebody like Tiffany Stratton because you're trying to build a female division. I think the women probably should have gone a lot higher because of the fact that, you're trying to build yourself maybe, a stronger division. Because, boy, what if you got to the end of the thing and you only got yourself like 2 women? How great of a women's division you're going to have with that? I remember, if you're not mistaken, when the draft first started way back in like 2002, I remember both shows had something unique to the show. I think all the women were on Monday Night Raw, and then like all the cruiserweights at that time were on SmackDown. So it was like you had something unique to the shows. Now, obviously, it's right down the middle. So I guess it's just difficult in general. Like, yeah, I understand Drew McIntyre. It's I will say Legado del Fantasma, and if you notice that the APA, specifically Ron Simmons, having a hard time pronouncing that, you can tell he has never said that before in his life when he was giving out the pick.
That was interesting.
Yeah. So when he was saying that, but yeah, I mean, I would have picked Drew McIntyre over that stable. Santos Escobar, great, but I think when it comes to stables, that's probably one of the weaker ones. And now they're on SmackDown all by themselves too. You know what I mean? So I would have, probably picked Drew McIntyre. I mean, that would have just been only one pick better, but I would have picked Drew McIntyre over that. What
about Braun Strowman?
Braun Strowman. I mean, if he's back, you want Braun Strowman. Why wouldn't you?
Here's what I would think too. Like, I think the reason you pick Braun Strowman as high as you do, obviously, because he's a freak of nature. He's just a monster among men, so to speak. But I think with the pending arrival of Eric Redbeard, aka Eric Rowan, and Uncle Howdy. So are we going to get a little? Faction that's a tribute to Bray Wyatt coming up? I feel like it's coming.
And I think this is not too difficult because we talked about this last week of when we think that the kind of waters are going to get muddied, and I'm seeing so many places here when it comes to like somebody on Raw being on SmackDown, someone on SmackDown being on Raw, vice versa, because of the fact that we have so many who were on drafted. So you're wondering, all right, well, like, I mean, are they going to muddy the water when they come back and just pick whatever show they want to be on? Charlotte Flair was undrafted. Dexter Loomis was undrafted. Eric from Eric and Ivar was undrafted. Eric from the Viking Raiders. Jimmy Uso. He's inactive right now due to an undisclosed injury, but not drafted.
Yeah.
Omos. Nothing's wrong with Omos and MVP. Undrafted for unknown reasons. Right?
We all know why. I think WWE is going to use Omos like they've already been putting it out there. He's a special attraction, kind of like in a different light as like an Andre the Giant because he's such a big human being. Like he's a larger than life character. I think they're just going to keep him. They're going to use him in special moments. So I don't think they're going to tie him to any rosters at this point. I think he's going to be kind of a free agent and kind of do whatever he wants.
And one person who was drafted in kind of tumultuous circumstances is Carlito. He was drafted as part of Latino World Order, going to Raw, and we found out that he was behind, the injury to Dragon Lee the night before WrestleMania.
Yeah.
So is he going to join Legado del Fantasma and move over to SmackDown? So I guess it's the opportunities, right? And Roman Reigns going completely undrafted and probably back by the summer to compete, if not sooner than that.
Yeah.
Because of those reasons, I could definitely see things essentially fragmenting.
What do you think of the Raw roster and SmackDown roster after the draft? Where are you leaning towards for the better roster at this point?
That's a difficult one because for the most part, they really stayed the same. There wasn't much changeover. Orton's on SmackDown. LA Knight's still on SmackDown. The Bloodline's still on SmackDown. AJ Styles still on SmackDown. Bianca Belair still on SmackDown. Jade Cargill still on SmackDown. Imperium still on Raw. CM Punk and Drew McIntyre. And
DIY and Candice LeRae and Indy Hartwell over there now. So would that make the difference for you?
I do think, and I guess you got to look in the supplemental picks. Raw got a ton of supplemental picks. Apollo Crews, Tegan Knox, and Gianni Vinci from Imperium. He's going to SmackDown.
Yeah.
Well, Raw got, they retained the Diamond Mind. They now got Dijak back from NXT. They retained Natalia, my favorite one that we talk about because of the fact that he was drafted last year and yet didn't do nothing and got drafted again this year. Odyssey Jones. That's got to be a storyline with Odyssey Jones. We got to turn this into just like, similar to the guy who like leaves the Royal Rumble and hides under the ring the whole time. Like that's got to be Odyssey Jones' thing of like keep getting drafted despite the fact that we don't actually see him get involved in anything on the show. Like, still on Raw.
Not only that though, Odyssey Jones, because obviously for all of our listeners and viewers of this podcast, we are based out of Syracuse, New York, and Odyssey Jones is a former Syracuse University football player. So we got some ties to that as well. And you're right, though. It's so weird that he gets drafted and like, okay, so what are we doing with this guy? Like, what's going on? It's weird.
Yeah. He appeared at the most recent. That was probably, most house shows are pretty much reruns. Doesn't matter what city they're in, kind of thing. But I will say that might have been a unique to Syracuse moment when he took on Omos in the house show in Syracuse right before WrestleMania about a month ago. So, and then they made sure to obviously bill him from Syracuse, New York when he came out. But yeah, that should be like, he should just get drafted he should have got drafted to SmackDown this time around, went out on SmackDown, like waved to the crowd and said, I'll see you next year at the draft. Good night, everybody. And
here's the thing too, like, obviously Omos is like a huge, he's a very tall guy. Odyssey is billed at over 400 pounds, so I could see why they would match up two behemoths like that. Like I'm just wondering like what the deal is with Odyssey Jones. Like I don't know what it is. Maybe he's the same thing. Maybe he's a special attraction that they're not talking about a lot. But like I would like to see more of him. If WWE, like I want to know what their plans are, I guess, with him.
Baron Corbin's back on the main roster from NXT. He's on SmackDown. While Braun Breaker's over now on Raw. So I think, I'm going to give it to SmackDown. I think they overall, I think they may not have the biggest roster. I don't have all the exact numbers right in front of me of, how many were picked at what show and this, that, and the other thing. It's probably not too difficult to find. But I think SmackDown has the better, and I mean, it's easier too, right? Because you got a 2-hour show, right? So it's easier to have the better, just AJ Styles and LA Knight can take up half the show with a match.
Hey, I'm
As
just
we've
gonna
seen.
say this. What show is Seth Rollins on? Oh, that's right, Raw. What show is Braun Breaker on? What's he on? I think he's on Raw, isn't he?
He's now on Raw. He moved over from SmackDown to
And then
Raw.
Braun Strowman. Where's he on?
Braun Strowman is on Raw as well.
I mean, I'm Damian Priest. Obviously, that whole crew is there. I mean, I'm just looking through this list. I mean, it looks like, let's see, Sheamus. I mean, I mentioned the Mad Dragon, the Final Testament. Like, to me, like, I'm going down the list. I'm a big fan of the Creed brothers, that Diamond Mine, like that. Like, that crew is good. I think Ivy Niles I think she's got a potential to be a really good women's competitor going forward. To me, I got to go the other way. I think Raw's the better roster right now.
So there was 9 supplemental picks after Raw, and there was 7 supplemental picks after SmackDown. On Raw, 3 picks went to SmackDown, and 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 went to Raw. So 6 to Raw, 3 to SmackDown on supplemental night 2. On supplemental night 1, it was a little more even. Raw got 4, SmackDown got 3. So either way, most of the supplemental picks went to Raw. They got 6, 7, 8, 9. They got 10 out of 16 went to Raw. So 10 out of 16 supplemental picks went to Raw. So they got more, but again, the show's longer, right? So I get that Raw's got some good guys. They got Seth Rollins for sure. But I guess even though it has nothing to do with the draft, what show's Cody Rhodes on? Right? He's on SmackDown.
True. I mean.
And I think really right now, who's the champion of this company? It's Cody Rhodes.
I think Raw's deeper, though. Raw's deeper.
Well, Raw's got to be deeper. It's 3 hours, right? So it's got to be a little bit deeper.
I mean, like, here's my thing. And yes, it's obviously a longer formatted show for 3 hours versus 2, but they have plenty of roster and extra to make 3 hours of entertainment every single week. That's how good that's how loaded that roster is. I would take Raw's roster 10 times out of 10 over SmackDown, even with Cody Rhodes in particular that I really like. Obviously, AJ Styles in LA Knight. I just think the potential for what we're going to see on Raw. I think Uncle Howdy. I think Eric Rowan. I think they're going to have themselves a new faction with Braun Strowman, where I think that's going to be something to watch on Monday Night Raw as well. So I'm excited for both shows, but I think Raw is going to be just a little bit better.
This upcoming Monday, May the 6th, is when the draft, I guess, becomes official, and we have the rosters set in place. So technically, I guess, this week on SmackDown, we could still have some people who were drafted to Raw showing up on SmackDown this upcoming weekend in France.